Well, good afternoon, folks. This is Ronnie Holder. I'm a senior sales rep for Texas and Louisiana with BASF. I'm actually a third generation pest controller out of Houston. I did my first crawl with my dad and my brother when I was 6. So I've been in this business my whole life. You can sit there and read all of my bio information, what have you, but I have been with BASF now for 21 years and have covered all the markets throughout the South and the Midwest, as well as Arizona. So I'm glad to be here with you. I want to thank the Heritage people for having me to present you a good talk on termite control as it relates to construction. So foundation types, construction anomalies, and termite control. That is very, very critical when you're talking about solving subterranean termite problems. This is the page that's got all my contact information. Please take a picture of it, save it, whatever. I'm available pretty much all the time. So send me an email, send me a text, give me a call. Shoot me some pictures of anything weird that you see out in the field, and I'll be glad to respond and give you my best guess or best estimate on how to go ahead and take care of that problem. So one thing I always like to do is I always like to show people this video of Termitor HE and how it works and penetrates into a termite shelter tube. Termitor HE has a proprietary BASF polymer that allows it to drag itself into that shelter tube much more quickly and thoroughly and efficiently as compared to Termitor SC. So on the left, we've got a drop of HE. On the right, we've got a drop of SC. So you can imagine the benefit of using Termitor HE as it relates to the reduced volume that you put in the soil, the reduced trench size that you have to dig, and the reduced time that it takes you to actually do a subterranean termite job. And I especially like Termitor HE because if you foam with Termitor HE, you're going to get penetration into a Formosan carton nest and or a eastern subterranean termite shelter tube a lot quicker than you will with the SC. So that might be something you want to consider to put in your arsenal as far as relates to foaming inside of wall voids for subterranean termites. So just like every living organism, termites need what? They need moisture, they need food, and they need access to the structure in order to get in there and find a food source, okay? We know that termites can enter a structure in a crack as small as 1/64th of an inch. So that means every plumbing penetration, every potential crack, any potential slab penetration is going to be an access point for subterranean termites. So when Mrs. Jones calls you out and she needs a termite estimate, there's a few things you need to figure out. Number one, is it a curative treatment? Number two, is it a preventative treatment? If it's a curative treatment, we certainly want to what? Identify where the termites are coming from, if at all possible. And then there's other things we need to consider. What type of construction is this? Is this a slab? Is this a floating slab? Is there a basement? And one thing I always like to do is I like to look at the roof line right here from this street view. Because if there's a change in this roof line, it's very possible that we could have an addition onto that structure. And if there's an addition, we all know that that's a potential what? Potential expansion joint where the two separate pours of concrete come together, which can be a major access point for some subterranean termites. We want to understand the conducive conditions. You know, is the soil too high? And am I able to access the slab and make a thorough inspection around the whole entire exterior perimeter of that structure? What are the critical areas? What are the potential problem areas? Is there wood rot? Is there a leaking roof? Does the chimney leak? All of those things need to be inspected for, as well as identified and documented on your paperwork. So let's take a look at this diagram here. And we'll move from left to right. Number one, we've got vegetation really, really close to that structure. And is that preventing me from making a thorough inspection, especially if those are holly bushes? Or is that mulch in that area? Is that too high? Is it over the slab? Both of those would be inaccessible as well as conducive conditions. What about the tree stump down here on the left hand side? Tree stumps, obviously, subterranean termites could use those for food sources. We could certainly treat this tree stump for subterranean termites with the proper products, as well as what? Suggest that we do a preventative treatment based on the subterranean termites that are in this tree stump. Here again, we've got what? We've got a filled porch here. That could be a critical area. We've got more shrubbery here. We've got soil over the slab. We've got a brick wall right here. When I lived in Arizona, one of the biggest conducive conditions that we had was the air conditioning drip line, the condensation lines that would come out and provide moisture sources in and around the structure where subterranean termites would love to be. Over here on the far right, we see that wood pile. We always want to recommend that Mrs. Jones move that wood pile where? Outside and away from that structure, so she's not drawing subterranean termites, carpenter ants, wood boring beetles, or anything that close to the structure. When we go up and inspect the attic, one thing I always love to do is I love to what? I look at these vents. I check these vents for maybe old swarmers or even the wings from termite swarmers that could be stuck in these vents. And I also want to check that chimney really, really well. A lot of times the contractors won't do the flashing perfectly on that chimney, and we might have a roof leak that is a conducive condition and needs to be documented on that diagram. And one of the biggest things is any of the utility lines coming underneath the structure and through the slab. Those are all critical and conducive conditions that need to be noted in diagram and possibly treated, right? So there's a lot going on in this slab and this picture right here. And what we have is we have a floating slab, meaning that number one, they've poured a footing and then they've used hollow block to make a stem wall. And after all of that is done, they come back and they pour that slab on the inside of that hollow block. So that means we have expansion joint all the way around the interior of that structure. Also, potential entry points are the hollow blocks themselves. Every place that you see a red diamond is a potential entry point as well as a potential treatment point. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the tools. Obviously, we needed graph paper, pencil, ruler, clipboard for the diagram, okay? The diagram should have the outline of the structure as well as location of existing damaged tunnels, wings, or active subterranean termites or even drywood termites. This is the big one right here, is evidence of other wood-destroying organisms. So as a pest control professional, the TDA and Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, most all of your government entities require that you document other wood-destroying organisms. That would include drywood termites. That would include carpenter ants or wood-boring beetles, okay? Need to note the conducive conditions, okay? Those are conditions that need to be corrected if at all possible to prevent the subterranean termites from living in, so let's say a windowsill that's been leaking and we've got moisture in that area. The termites could be living in from that moisture and not returning to the soil where your treatment would normally be. Once again, we want to document any expansion joints, changes in the grade. If you're in the rural areas, location of welds or cisterns is very, very critical, because if there's a well or a cistern, chances are there's only a few products, and they're mainly baits that I could actually use to solve subterranean termites in a well house on a structure. So if I know that well house is 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet away from the structure, I want to document it on that diagram so Mrs. Jones knows and everybody knows that I know where that well house is and I know what I can and can't do in order to treat that. Certainly want to list past and known suspected treatments and infestations. And then we want to certainly list the treatment specifications. So if you're going to get sued for a termite job, what's the first thing the attorneys are going to ask for? Number one, they're going to ask for your subterranean termite service agreement as well as the diagram. So in today's world, we can back up our diagrams with pictures because every one of us has a camera on their phone. And so this document, along with several pictures showing conducive conditions, showing areas of activity, showing anything that's critical to this structure, should be attached to that. And main thing to remember is a poorly done diagram can lead to future problems with the property owner, especially when regarding structural damage and possible claims. So let's take a look at some real world diagrams. And I promise you, I have gotten these over the years, and these were left with customers that PMPs actually proposed subterranean termite treatments. Okay. Number one, my 8-year-old granddaughter could draw a better diagram than this. Okay. Let's use a ruler, keep it neat, keep it straight. And we're certainly missing all of the linear footage. Okay. But they did give them a price for $1,305, okay, with a $185 2-year renewal, okay? Where's the bath trap? Where are any of the plumbing penetrations in here? Did they even bother to inspect the attic? This one here is pretty good. We've got a legend up here. C1 is heavy foliage, C2 is the deck, and C3 is wood rot. We've got our dimensions, our linear footages around the structure. So that's nice, neat, and clean. But here again, what am I missing? What about the inside? What about showers? What about bath traps or any other potential entry point for subterranean termites? If you ever leave Mrs. Jones an estimate with your boot print on it, shame on you, okay? At the end of the day, obviously it was windy that day. The paperwork blew off the clipboard, and this gentleman or person had to use their boot to actually stop it from blowing away. And we've got a nice big shoe print on something that we're going to actually leave with the customer. Not very professional. To me, right here, this person has taken the time to give the homeowner a snapshot of what's going on around their structure. Number one, I've got a great clean diagram with linear footages on it. Number two, I have a legend over here that's number one is R is wood rot. Number one is wood to ground contact, high soil, moisture penetrations. All of those are conducive conditions. And then if you notice here, EPS is evidence of previous subterranean termites. We move over here into the house. They actually have the bath trap drawn, okay? And this person actually, good idea, inspected the washer and dryer area and determined that there was a subfloor underneath that washer and dryer area. They've got the wooden deck marked up here with the detached garage, okay? Another wood deck, and then also all of the legends up here as far as what's going on. So to me, this is a great diagram to leave with a customer. You give them the estimate based on this, chances are really, really good that you're going to win the day and win the job. Okay. Just because I don't find subterranean or drywood termites, do we tell the customer that their home is termite free? The answer is absolutely not. And the reason is because even with the best inspections, even with moisture meters and FLIR guns and things like that, termites can remain hidden and unnoticed for long periods of time. Okay. Hollow masonry construction, like we saw on one of those first slides, with the floating slab and the hollow cinder block stem wall, those can hide areas of infestation. IFAS construction and stucco construction Termites can be hidden in those areas, and even with the best inspection, we can never find them. So I like this statement right here. The inspector puts himself and the company's integrity on the line every time an inspection is done. Okay. Make sure you document all damage, conducive conditions, recommendations, and those need to be presented to the homeowner and or their agent. Okay. Follow the laws and the regulations for whatever state you're in, whether it's Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, New Mexico, wherever you might be. Follow the Florida, wherever you might be, follow the WDI regulations. So let's take a look at some simple construction terms. And one thing I want you to remember is that construction changes over time. Okay. So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, what was the primary construction type of residential structures? Well, it was a pier and beam, a crawl space structure, right? It wasn't until after the 30s, during the 30s, 40s, and 50s that they perfected the use of concrete to start making slabs. Okay. So the older the neighborhood that you're in, the more likely you're going to have pier and beam construction. And as newer neighborhoods get built, the construction type changes over time. So just be sure to kind of understand what part of town you're in. Is it new construction? Is it older construction? And document from there. So what we've got here is we've got a crawl space. Okay. We've got a footing down here in the lower left supporting a hollow block stem wall. Inside of the crawl space, we've got another footing supporting a pier that supports the floor joist. And then over here on the right-hand side, we've got another footing supporting a solid stem wall that creates this dirt-filled porch, right? And all of this was done at separate pours. So where's the potential entry points? Okay. This is a great picture of a floating slab. On the right-hand side, we've got a footing that supports the solid stem wall, right? And then you've got that expansion joint all the way around the interior of the structure. So our entry points include that expansion joint on the inside. It includes any plumbing penetration, okay? Commodes, probably not the shower. Normally, if there's a problem with the shower, it's due to a leaking shower pan. Okay. So back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they had shower pans made out of galvanized. Okay. And then once the mortar on the floor of the shower started giving away and losing its seal, guess what? It would drip onto that galvanized pan. It would rot out that pan. And then the moisture would leak into the form boards that form out the wall of the shower as well as the floor. So if you have problems with subterranean termites in the shower, never come here and drill a hole right next to the shower drain. And the reason for that is you could be drilling a hole right through a shower pan. So this is one of the most common building types that we see throughout the whole country, really, is a monolithic slab. Mono means one. That means all of the slab was poured at one time. So what are my potential entry points? Certainly the exterior perimeter, okay, especially anytime you've got a 90-degree angle in the slab. Termites love those corners. Any penetration through that slab where it's a drain line, whether it's water lines, electrical lines, anything like that is a potential entry point. And then if this monolithic slab cracks, any crack could be a potential entry point. So this is an awesome picture of a monolithic slab before it is poured. And if you notice here, we've got form boards all the way around the structure that's going to keep the concrete in place. We've got our vapor barrier down. We've got our plumbing right here, these plumbing pipes and penetrations. And then we've got these grade stakes. And attached to those grade stakes is a string line. And those string lines actually tell the concrete foreman how high to pour the concrete. The other place that we could have grade stakes is where? Next to any of this plumbing penetration. And the reason for that is when they're pouring thousands of pounds of concrete in that area, it's necessary to keep the plumbing plumb, which means upright. And the way they used to do it would be they would drive a wooden stake next to these drains, and then they would wrap a piece of string around them to keep them straight up and down. So after the concrete's cured, the pipe fitters, the plumbers would have no problem connecting all of the other plumbing parts to those drain lines and supply lines. So let's see what happens after they pour the slab. Oh, well, guess what? They didn't pour it high enough to cover these two grade stakes. So we said first on that termites need what? Number one, moisture, which is the soil. Number two, they need access, which is going to be these grade stakes. And number three, they need a food source, which is also going to be these grade stakes. Now, here in the state of Texas, it's not required that pre-treats be done on residential structures unless it's certain municipalities that require that. So what's the contractor going to do? He's basically going to grind these down off even, and he might put a little mortar mix over the top of them, but it's doubtful. I mean, the foreman might not even be on the job. So after the concrete's cured, they're going to put up their walls. They're going to put down their carpet and the pad underneath. And you will never know that food source and entry point is right there. I mean, there could be a wall right over either one of these grade stakes, and you would never know that it's there. So it's these construction anomalies that we need to be concerned with. So normally when we do a termite job and we're using Termidor, we do it one time and then we solve the problem right away. It's that second and third year, if you still have issues, you still need to start thinking outside of the box to determine what could have happened during the construction process that's still causing these subterranean termites to be active and prevalent in the structure. This is a great slide of a grade stake left in the ground in the slab. So number one, we've got food source, we've got moisture, we've got access. They're eating this grade stake, and now guess what? They're eating those plates right there that support the studs, and eventually they'll come and start eating on the studs as well. Wow, what about that? So this is a monolithic slab, and what the contractor has done is they have put cardboard around the drain, okay? That cardboard extends down underneath the slab, and what do you think cardboard is to termites? Well, it's basically like banana pudding or brownies, okay? It's like a beautiful food source. They love the heck out of it, especially if it's got moisture in it, and that would be a great place for subterranean termites. Number one, to access the structure, find other plates and or studs to start eating on, and chances are you'll never even know that that's there. So this is some construction from Oklahoma. Years ago, I covered Oklahoma for BASF. And for many years, the Oklahoma standard of construction was you ran your air vents and air ducts through the slab. Okay. So what they do is they'd hook these galvanized pipes up for the ventilation system for the structure, and then they'd pour the concrete. Well, what happens to galvanized over time? It tends to rust out, right? And then anytime you've got two pieces of galvanized come together, guess what? There's enough of a gap for the subterranean termites to get into those areas as well. Notice here how they put the PVC attached to the galvanized. And I like the fact that the contractor left his Marlboro cigarette butt right here for the consumer as well. So how do you treat these things? I had a very good customer in Edmond that used to use a camera, the same type of camera that plumbers would use to inspect the sewer lines and things like that. He would put a camera down in here to figure out exactly where the subterranean termites were coming from. And then he would drill holes, very tiny 1/4-inch holes, and then treat those areas in and around where the subterranean termites were. So this is a great picture. We've got form boards left in place, encased with about 50 pounds of concrete. What do you think is going to happen here? Well, when I came back 3 months later after they had finished the house on this picture, the contractor had put 2 feet of soil right over this area and then put landscape material on top of it and called it a flower bed. Now, most of us probably would never figure out that this is there, but with this hollow block construction, we know that those mortar joints can always crack, and there can be cracks in the blocks themselves, and those are great entry points for subterranean termites. Okay, so here we've got some people call this a cold joint. I call it an expansion joint. It's basically where 2 pieces of concrete that were poured at different times meet, okay? So on the left is going to be the old piece of concrete, and the reason I know this is, number one, I've got my plates down here, and then I've got the studs on top of the plates, okay? So if I drill to treat this expansion joint, in my mind, it's always best to drill the new part of the slab. And the reason for that is, if you recall that pre-treat picture of that slab before it was poured, these have solid beams going down 2 to 3 feet to support the exterior perimeter of that foundation, right? So when they do additions, generally, they will not have those big 2-foot beams. And in order to get our termiticide into that expansion joint, probably be best to drill that new slab. This is a fairly, and it's not that new, but it's becoming newer on individual homes, okay? This is pretty common in apartment buildings back in the 70s and 80s, and now it's going into residential construction. This is called post-tension slab, okay? But it is monolithic. And the reason that they build them this way, these cables right here, what they do is they allow that slab to give and take a little bit based on whether it's too wet or whether it's too dry. That slab is not, it's gonna what, expand and contract, and hopefully these cables will keep it from cracking. So these cables extend out through the wall here, and once the concrete is poured, they have nuts on these cables that they tighten up as that concrete is being cured. This is a great picture I took just about a year ago, some brand new post-tension construction slab work here. Notice here, this is probably going to be a commode, too small to be a shower. Notice the vent pipe up here and all of the grade stakes protruding down through here. And right here is a great portion of where those beams are. And we know that those beams throughout these monolithic slabs, they're designed to support the load-bearing walls of the building. There's another good picture. Notice here we still have a big footing, if you will, right down here along the entire exterior perimeter of the structure. So let's say we don't know what type of structure it is. We think it's a monolithic slab. That's fine. How do I determine if it's a post-tension slab? Well, the telltale signs are these pock marks right here, okay? So you remember the cable that was extending out through the support wall, okay? They come back after the slab is poured and they cut those off with bolt cutters and then put some mortar mix right over the top of those holes to make it look a little bit better. Here's another great picture. This is newer construction. Notice that right here I've got 2 cables close together. Here's another pock mark, so that should just tell me, hey, this is a post-tension construction slab. Why is that important for me to understand? The reason it's important, because if I want to down drill in that slab and I hit one of those cables, it could be big, big trouble. Okay, we never want to try to drill a post tension monolithic construction slab, if at all possible. There's more pictures. You've got these tie downs here that help support the support walls, and you see how everything's kind of tied in there together. And then over here, we've got a nice big crack. Probably the contractor may or may not do something about it, but they're definitely going to put soil and mulch and things like that in and around this area. So this might be an area that we never see. Oops. So what do I have here? This is brand new construction about 2 miles away from my house. I recommend that if you're new to the termite industry, or even if you've been there 40 years, guess what? Go out on a Sunday, either before church or after church, to a brand new neighborhood and just start walking around and looking at how they're building houses today. So what I've got here is the blue line is a cold water supply line. The red line is a hot water supply line. Then I've got a drain. And if you look right down here, guess what? That is a huge 3-inch gaping hole that subterranean termites can access very, very easily. So what's the contractor going to do? He's going to put a cabinet over there. He's going to tie a sink into that drain line, run the supply lines up into the faucets, and you'll never know that that's there. And now, since this is Texas and we don't have pre-treats, guess what? This could be a huge issue at some point in time in the future. So another good one, this is a kitchen island, actually. This is the drain lines, right? We see our hot and cold water supply lines, and we've got this pipe right here that's it's holding up these supply lines right here. So let's say we get subterranean termites in this area. Will we ever get enough foam in this wall void to get into that pipe that's containing that hot and cold water supply line? That's what it looks like after it's finished. And of course, what they're going to do is they're going to put a big slab of granite on here. They're going to put a sink in here. It's going to tie in to this drain line here. And you've got a major issue if you ever get subterranean termites in this type of area. So what are you going to do with this house? This picture was actually taken in Slidell, Louisiana. And so my question to you is, are you going to walk away? Or are you going to run? So some of the best termite jobs that you ever will do are the ones you don't do. Let them be somebody else's headache, okay? In reality, today we've got enough tools that we could, if this is a customer of ours, we could certainly offer Mrs. Jones some protection with some termite bait stations, some Trelona annual bait stations around the exterior perimeter. We could treat any wall voids with foam where she might have areas of activity. But that just goes to show you how soil subsidence can affect a structure. So another common type of slab is a floating slab. And we've talked about this a couple of times already. But over here on the left, I've got a solid footing. Your footings are always solid. And then either you have a hollow block or a solid stem wall to support the slab that's poured inside of those stem walls. There's a good picture of it. Notice down here in the center, lower center, I've got another great big gaping hole. Contractor, what's he going to do? Maybe he'll fill that up with mortar mix. But what happens to concrete or mortar mix as it dries? It shrinks. And we already said that it only takes 1/64 of an inch for subterranean termites to gain access to the structure. There's a good picture on the upper right showing subterranean termite tunnels coming up through the cinder blocks and then eating into the wood. Here's a nice one. So what happens is when you pour your perimeter wall You set your anchor bolts where your 2x6s or 2x4s are going to go. You set them while the concrete is drying. Well, these folks decided to come back and drill that stem wall. And when they drilled the stem wall and put the anchor bolt in, guess what? Got another huge crack down here on the bottom, on the outside edge of that stem wall that they're going to try to cover it up, make it look nice. But guess what happens on the top? Is that a 64th of an inch? Absolutely. So they're going to put that plate right over that anchor bolt. And if you get subterranean termites in this outside wall void, you'll get lucky if you're ever able to solve that problem. Another type of slab is called a supported slab. I personally have never seen one of these. I think they're in my territory up in the Shreveport, Louisiana area. So what they do is when they do their stem wall, they do not pack the soil down here before they pour this slab. And what happens is they expect to have a gap in between the soil and the slab itself. So that gap could be anywhere from 6 inches to a foot. And here's what it looks like before the slab is poured. So all of these cinder blocks have basically been cut in half. You've got all of these entry points here, and this could be a nightmare as far as treatment is concerned. There's my good friend Ray Myers from Florida actually treating Formosan termites in a supported slab. And this actually used to be a storage shed, okay? And it had so much Formosan damage that they went ahead and tore the shed down, had the slab treated before they rebuilt a brand new storage shed. Okay. Sometimes if we have floating slabs, we can treat them from the exterior perimeter. Okay. But then we have to think of, we've got to go through the brick veneer. We've got to go through the cinder blocks to make sure that our termiticide gets into that expansion joint. Now, why would I do this? What if Mrs. Jones has tile or hardwood floor inside this room right here? That's probably the only reason I would ever drill horizontally to try to treat that expansion joint on the inside of the structure. Okay. Cracks in corners. Those can be an issue. A lot of times what will happen is your mulch and or your soil level could be way high. If you see a crack like this on a corner, don't assume that termites can't get in there. Certainly write this down as a conducive condition and an inaccessible area because you can't see what's inside of that crack. If you're doing an inspection and an estimate and you see something like this, I'm hoping the red bells and whistles are going off in your head because this screams to me foundation issues, right? Okay. So if we're lucky, we can go inside. Maybe there's carpet in that adjacent room. We could pull the carpet back to understand, is there a crack in that slab? If there is, there's certainly remedial measures that we can take as far as drilling and trying to treat that crack to prevent the termites or cure the termites that might already be there. Basements. Don't run into too many basements down here along the Gulf Coast. I know the further north that you move up into the up Midwest and places like that, basements are very, very common. And believe it or not, there were basements in Arizona. That was pretty strange construction to me, but basements can give you a lot of problems. Okay. Because bottom line is they're basically a floating slab with a lot of cinder blocks, maybe some stem walls as well. Okay. And then when you're talking about basements, if you read your termiticide label, it tells you that you need 4 gallons per 10 linear foot per foot of depth. So if I've got a basement, that means I need 4x the amount of normal termiticide to get down to a maximum depth of 4 feet. Now, if I decide to use Termitor HE on this job, guess what? I only need 2 gallons per 10 linear foot to a maximum of 2 feet. So HE could certainly save me a lot of time and effort and labor on this type of job. Let's talk a little bit about commercial construction. This is tilt wall construction. Most of everybody's probably seen this. You probably have accounts this type that have the dock doors and everything like that. Well, the way they build these is, number one, they pour the slabs first. Okay. And these slabs are basically in 25-foot squares. They're all tied together. And every place that you see a center post that's supporting the ceiling, that is where 4 pieces of concrete come together, and that's potential entry points for our subterranean termites. After they pour this slab, they come out and they pour another beam to support the tilt walls, right? Okay. And all of this comes together as the roof is tied in, okay? So all of these walls and the roof and everything is tied in together with these outside walls sitting on beams, and then that tilt wall right there, you see the big expansion joint in between the 2 pieces of concrete. And then they're going to come back finally, and they're going to pour more concrete right in through here. So we've got multiple expansion joints all throughout tilt wall or commercial type construction. That's a great picture of that support post that's supporting that roof. 4 pieces of concrete coming together, an excellent place for subterranean termites to enter. We also have to be concerned with what? Plumbing penetrations, electrical penetrations, things like that that could also be areas where our termites get in. And when we look at this building, I mean, there's nothing for them to eat, right? The only thing that they're going to eat is basically any wooden pallets that are on the floor. Maybe they'll eat the paper off the sheetrock, because generally in this type of construction, all of your studs are aluminum studs to build out the offices and everything. So it's more of a nuisance pest than it is a structural pest, unless they're eating, the cardboard boxes full of papers on the wooden pallet that's on the ground. So just be aware that there's lots of places we can treat on this tilt wall type of construction. Okay. So lots going on in this slide. The bottom line is every place that you see red is a potential entry point and a potential treatment point. Okay. So it's critical that we understand what type of construction we have. Are there multiple types of construction? Is there a crawl space with a slab attached to it, right? So are there grade stakes left in place? Are there cracks in the slabs? We know there's always plumbing and electrical penetrations. And the thing we also know is that termites follow straight lines. So if there's a electrical conduit or a plumbing conduit coming in under the structure, termites will follow those. They'll follow tree roots under the structure and then try to find a crack to get up inside of whether it's a residential or commercial structure. Okay, bath traps, by all means, access, inspect. And if you can access and inspect a bath trap, by all means, please treat it. We know that 60+% of interior infestations come from what? Bath traps, pipes, and other plumbing penetrations. If we notice here, this house was built probably in the 90s, early 2000s. Look at all of the plumbing. What is the plumbing? Plumbing is PVC and plastic, right? So back in the day, in the 50s, 60s, they were using what? Copper and cast iron. So now we have, if we want to down drill any of this, guess what? There are potential problems if I hit a water supply line or if I hit a plastic drain line or anything like that. Okay. Bath trap treatments. There's several ways to treat a bath trap. If it's me, I'm not going to drill from the outside to get to that bath trap. Hopefully this is a closet on the right-hand side, and I can convince Mrs. Jones the need to what? Cut an access panel. inspect it, treat it, and then that way I can inspect that area again next year for her 1-year termite renewal. So what's wrong with this picture? So obviously there's no dirt in this bath trap. So can I just treat termiticide right over all of that concrete and everything? Well, no, not really. So in this instance, I might need to get a wheelbarrow or a 5-gallon bucket of dirt. I want to mix my termiticide in with that dirt and then come in and pack it in and around that pipe. So if the termites come up there, they're going to hit that active ingredient with that soil, and we're going to be able to take care of those areas, that area right there. Here's a good picture of cutting a bath trap. One thing you'll notice is on the left, I've got the plumbing penetration, and he's also got a stud to screw that bath trap in. If we don't have studs to screw the bath trap panel in, we can always use the molly bolts, the white or the blue ones, to expand so that bath trap looks good and it stays in place. Our termiticide labels are very clear. It says to trench and rod into the trench. However, sometimes it says rodding only may be done in certain circumstances. So if Mrs. Jones has 30-year-old wax leaf ligustrums 2 feet from her structure, chances are you will never dig a trench. Okay, so then I can rod. On the right-hand side shows you rodding straight up and down, leaves columns of termiticide. Okay, that means I could have gaps in between every 12 inches where I rod. For me, I prefer to rod with a 360-degree tip at a 45-degree angle to create a better and more thorough coverage in that area that I cannot dig that trench in. Guess what? Crawl spaces must be crawled. And I learned early on when I was young and doing crawl spaces for my grandfather, where is the best place to be on August 15th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon? It's definitely underneath the crawl space because it's nice and cool. Okay. Multiple places termites can enter from these crawl spaces, the pipes, the plumbing, the brick veneer, all of that. This is one of the last houses I ever sold. This was an elderly couple in Northwest Houston, called us out for a termite estimate. I just barely stuck my head in there with my flashlight and I went, oh my gosh. And the fact was that another pest control company in Houston had been doing their quarterly pest control for like 2 or 3 years. And none of those pest control technicians ever bothered to stick their head underneath the crawl space where the door was on the outside axis of the outside. So even if you're doing general pest control, it might not hurt to every now and then stick your head underneath the crawl space just to see if there might be an issue like this. This is not a crawl space. I've never been this lucky before in my life, but anyway, some states require that you remove all wooden debris from underneath the structure. Okay. If that's the case and you need to do that, certainly I would believe that you'd want to charge for that service as well. Okay. Treating inside of the foundation wall, easy enough. Okay. Plumbing leaks are a huge problem. I was on a plumbing leak with Formosans about a month ago. Somehow or another, the flashing from the gutter allowed the water to leak into the wall voids. The Formosans found it, even though they had a bait system around the exterior perimeter. The Formosans had come up from another area and found the plumbing leak and were living off of it, and it was just a nightmare. This is actually Nasta Termes, which is in Florida as of now, probably moving west as we speak. Okay. So in the 70s and 80s, when they were building houses, they used to put tar inside of the bath traps, thinking that that would be a termite deterrent. So if you run into places with tar and or some kind of hardened material with gravel in it, what have you, you either need to drill or chip away at that to get to the soil where your termiticide can be accepted by the soil underneath there to make sure that you've got thorough coverage in that bath trap. Okay. I'm talking about treating piers. If you read your subterranean termite treatment label, it's going to say treat to the what? The top of the footing. So this is actually in New Orleans in the French Quarter. Right here is the top of the footing. Okay. So this is another instance where I need to maybe get a wheelbarrow. Go buy some dirt from Lowe's or Home Depot, mix up my termiticide with that dirt based on the cubic footage, bring that in here and pack this around this pier so I'm not trenching below the top of the footing and maybe causing structural support issues if I do that. The other thing I want to do is I want to rip down this Formosan tunnel right here, and I want to see if there's any cracks in this mortar. I can see a crack over here. I can see a crack over here. If that's hollow brick or there's voids in that mortar, I might need to drill into these areas and treat and get our liquid termiticide inside of there as well. Okay. Most people, unless you live in West Texas, don't see this type of construction too often. This is actually a cedar stump that is acting as a pier. I took this picture years ago. I think it was in Mason or Junction. It was somewhere way out in West Texas. And the entire crawl space had nothing but cedar piers. Okay. So the beautiful thing about cedar, we all know that it's somewhat insect repellent when it's new. As it ages, guess what? It becomes termites don't care. And when these things rot out, it's just like a telephone pole or landscape timber. They rot out from the inside out. So if you run into a situation like this, make sure that you trench and rod down into that area. Try to get some all the way down to the top of the footing. And that way you can prevent the subterranean termites from going through the inside of that pier right there. Another example of what can happen with contractors, if you're treating hollow block, if anybody has ever treated hollow block, what you do is you drill through, and as soon as you feel it punch through, you pull them out immediately. So we know we've got two cell cinder blocks here. We treat the one cell on the right, then we're going to treat the joint because there's always a joint there. And then we're going to pop through this one on the left. But what about this one right here on the left-hand side? Is that ever going to receive any termiticide? So just another watch out. 98% of the jobs that we do is one and done. We do them, we solve the problem, etc. It's on that second or third year. If we still have issues, we need to start thinking outside of the box of what could be happening from a construction aspect. There's your void spacing for cinder blocks, 4 to 8 inch spacings. Then your bricks is 2 bricks is equal to 16 inches. In today's world, that's a tough job to get done, right? So with your newer termiticides, they allow you to do trench and trench rod into the trench, treat all of your areas of activity and call it good. Then if you have issues later on, they're going to surface and you'll be able to treat them as well. Okay, what's behind the wall? Brick veneers, huge gaps, right? We know that cinder blocks can crack. We know that they have mortar joints that can crack. So lots of areas for termites to enter the structure. Okay. This is a good one. You see a lot of these rock walls, mostly down in here in Texas. We don't put cinder block behind them, but in Oklahoma, this is a pretty much common building practice where you've got your cinder blocks and then they put this false stone wall in front of it. So lots of areas on this one as well. Okay. Foam. My gosh, I love foam. Foaming is one of the best tools, and it's been around for 20 years, but now that we have non-repellent termiticides, foaming is a great addition to any job that you'll ever do. So if I'm foaming on an outside wall or underneath a slab, I probably want a more wetter foam, because we know that foam seeks the path of least resistance, right? And it seeks its own level. But every place this foam touches, it's going to leave a fine layer of termiticide on every place that it touches. So if we do get subterranean termites trying to come up through here, we're going to have a great termiticide protection area all the way around. Okay, here's an example of foaming outside using a wetter foam. If we're foaming inside wall voids, inside Mrs. Jones' house, I want a much drier foam, something that's like the consistency of shaving cream, where you can put it in your hand, turn your hand over, and it doesn't drip. On the outside wall, I want some of those more liquidy type of slurry type of foam. And I certainly don't want to leave this exposed. I want to make sure that that's in a trench and I cover that trench up before I leave the structure. Okay, here's a great picture of foaming inside of a wall void. Notice how that foam is much more drier, because I want the foam to, number one, I don't want it to leak out underneath the baseboard after I am gone. So the drier foam is going to stay there for a long time. As the bubbles burst, it's going to leave that fine layer of active ingredient on every piece of wall void that it touches. Even the backside of sheetrock, all of this wood and everything, that'll have that layer of foam for you. Okay, stucco and IFAS. Okay, huge problems with stucco and IFAS. Number one, stucco is generally always built under grade. I remember years and years ago when I lived in Florida that the Florida Department of Agriculture required that every home be accessible to termite inspectors. So even if the builder built the stucco below grade, there was a company that made a lot of money just by going around and cutting off stucco, so pest control professionals could actually see and access and inspect the slab behind the stucco. This is our insulated concrete block, or ICB. And what they do is they sit these on top of pieces of rebar and then fill this area up with concrete. Okay. Very difficult and unique construction. Now, what happens is, even though that ICB is treated with 2,000 parts per million of what? Boric acid, and 1,000 parts per million of suspend or delta methrin, the termites marched through it like Sherman through Atlanta. They did not care. Even with those two insecticides impregnated into that area, that foam insulated board provided no protection against subterranean termites. This is the latest issue that I have run into over the last 2 to 3 years. This is post-construction spray foam insulation in attics and in living space wall voids. Number one, what we've done is we have a totally inaccessible area. Okay. Number two, this hides any and all moisture penetration from roof leaks. And number three, the Termitor labels SC and HE are very clear that you cannot foam in these areas, because this closed cell spray foam insulation will not accept any termiticide, any liquid whatsoever. So, I know this is brand new to be energy efficient and all this kind of stuff. I've even been in brand new crawl spaces, only 4 years old, where the contractor sprayed this underneath on the bottom of the floor in the crawl space. So how is a termite professional ever going to figure out where the issues are if we have issues with Formosans and or our eastern subterranean termites? So if you're doing your diagram, document, take pictures. You cannot be responsible for any termite damage based on this type of spray foam insulation. Just can't be. And I would certainly address that in my contracts that I give to my consumers as well. There's some more of it. Here's a great picture I took in Thibodaux, Louisiana. This was above a garage. It was a man cave above a garage. And guess what? The spray foam prevented anybody from seeing the formosans, and they've actually eaten that ceiling joist all the way up. I think they had to replace 2 or 3 of them. It was just a nightmare. So make sure that you document any spray foam insulation that you run into. We talked a little bit about stucco and how stucco always has some overpour and the soil is always above the slab. So we had an issue with this house, and we've got the overpour. You see that. So what we did was we dug up the overpour, and then we took soil samples. Okay. And that's a piece of the overpour in Dr. Bob's hand, and it was 3 to 4 inches deep. But what happened was, above that piece of overpour, guess what? There was plenty of termitor above that overpour to kill subterranean termites. But below the overpour, there was no termitor detected. So when you're doing the stucco type of houses, you've got to make sure that you get your trench deep enough to make sure we're getting it adjacent to where the slab is. Okay, we're wrapping it up here, folks. So on the left, prior to going to the job site, there's a lot of good things that you need to do. And one of my biggest things is, second one from the bottom, is calibrate. Hopefully every one of you calibrate your termite rigs at least once a year. Maybe in February would be a good time, but you need to know how much material is coming out of the end of your application tool. On the right, who can tell me what the most important thing is on the right? Find the termites point of entry. I'm hoping everybody said confirm the address. Because if you're like me and you've been in this business, you have driven to the wrong address before. Okay. All right. On the left, we've got know the whereabouts what? And I've highlighted this, the main water shutoff valve. Had a customer in the last 2 years hit a plumbing supply, a water supply line while they were down drilling inside of the structure. Did not know where the water shutoff valve was. The water damage did more damage than the subterranean termites would have ever done. Okay. In the center, we've got, during the application, we need to know our volumes. We need to know if there's any voids that need to be treated. We need to know where we can and should rod. We're going to drill and we're going to trench. And on the right-hand side, who can tell me what the most important thing is? Hopefully everybody says thank the customer, because you want that customer. You want to be sure that you got that customer, their friends, their kids, their grandkids. You want to have 3 or 4 generations of customers. And by cleaning up, being neat, and thanking that customer for their business, that will help you achieve that. Okay. So remember, the goal is to protect the structure from foraging and infesting subterranean termites. Each structure is unique and may require adaptation from normal protocols. Try to have the tools available to provide the best method of control for the structure. If things go weird and things aren't working the next year, you got to think outside of the box to figure out where that entry point is and what tools do I need in order to solve that problem. Okay. And with that, this is for my attorneys. Always read and follow the label directions. Refer to the label for registered uses. Uses not included on the label have not been evaluated for human and or environmental safety. Uses of products for non-labeled uses is a violation of federal law and can result in human and or environmental hazards. And with that, I want to thank you all. I want to thank the folks at Heritage for allowing me to provide you some good information. I hope you found it good on subterranean termite control as it relates to construction. And with that, I want to thank you. Thank you all. Have a good day. Enjoy the rest of the sessions.